Not all pain looks like violence. Some of it looks like guilt, like walking on eggshells, like explaining your needs over and over again just to be met with silence, or worse, shame. And the longer you stay, the harder it gets to tell whether you're in love or just used to being hurt. Most people don't realize they're in a toxic relationship, not because they're blind, but because they're loyal to their own suffering. The Stoics had no room for that kind of confusion. They taught that peace is a duty, not a luxury, that clarity is more valuable than comfort, and that any connection that pulls you away from your principles is poison. But recognizing it takes courage, not emotional chaos, but calm confrontation. This video isn't about drama. It's about discipline, about spotting the signs not with panic, but with precision. Because if you want your mind back, your energy, your focus, your self-respect, then you need to see the truth without flinching. These are 7 signs you're in a toxic relationship, and each one is a call to wake up. Sign number 1. You constantly apologize for how you feel, not for what you did, not for how you acted, just for feeling. You say, "I didn't mean to be so sensitive. Sorry, I know I'm overthinking. It's my fault. I shouldn't have brought it up." That's not accountability. That's erasure. And the more you do it, the more you start doubting your own experience. Toxic people don't always attack. Sometimes they gaslight. They don't say you're wrong. They just make you feel wrong for feeling anything. The Stoics didn't believe emotions were weakness. They believed untrained emotion was dangerous. But acknowledged emotion, that was clarity. If your feelings are always too much, maybe the space is too small. In a healthy relationship, your emotions don't need permission. They're not punishable. They're respected, even when they're difficult. So here's your first wake-up call. If you're constantly shrinking your truth just to keep peace, you're not in a relationship. You're in a quiet war. And the first person getting erased is you. Sign number 2. You've started to question your worth, not because of what was said, but because of what was never given. Affection that feels earned. Attention that comes only after distance. Love that arrives late and leaves early. You begin to wonder if you're too much, or maybe not enough. But here's the truth the Stoics understood. Your value doesn't fluctuate based on someone else's capacity to see it. Seneca said, "You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire." In other words, you give them endless grace, but leave none for yourself. A toxic relationship doesn't always insult you. Sometimes it starves you of recognition, of emotional safety, of being seen. And slowly, your self-respect bleeds out. You stop asking for what you need. You settle. You justify. And worst of all, you forget who you were before the dynamic taught you to shrink. You don't need to be perfect to be treated with care. You just need to remember this. Real love doesn't erase you. It reminds you who you are. Sign number 3. Your peace depends entirely on their mood. One wrong tone, and you're spiraling. One unread message, and you can't focus. One bad day from them, and suddenly, your whole week is off track. That's not connection. That's emotional captivity. The Stoics were clear. Freedom isn't just political. It's personal. You are not free if your mind is owned by someone else's unpredictability. If their silence triggers your self-doubt. If their approval defines your stability. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But in a toxic relationship, you forget that. You get trained to read their mood before you speak. You anticipate their reactions before sharing your thoughts. You censor yourself, not for clarity, but for survival. And over time, this mental hypervigilance becomes your normal. Until you're no longer living, you're managing. That's not love. That's quiet chaos. And no one wins in a relationship where one person holds the peace and the other walks on eggshells trying not to break it. If you're training your mind like a warrior, hit subscribe. No hype, just discipline. Sign number 4. You feel unsafe being honest. Not because they said, don't speak, but because every time you do, something breaks. They shut down. They twist your words. They make it about them. Or worse, they use your honesty as ammo later. So you start choosing silence. You edit your truth. You filter your feelings. And you call it keeping the peace. But peace that comes at the cost of your voice is not peace. The Stoics believed in restraint, but not repression. Epictetus said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, sign number 5, you're always the one doing the emotional labor. You initiate the apologies. You keep the peace. You check in. You overthink. You fix, manage, explain, soften. And they just exist. Maybe they don't even see the damage. Or maybe they do. And they're fine with you carrying all the weight. Either way, you've become both the glue and the prisoner. And here's what the Stoics would ask. Is this love, or is it your fear of letting go disguised as loyalty? Marcus Aurelius wrote, you don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. Sometimes, the most radical act of strength is stepping away from something that keeps weakening you. But you won't see that until you ask the real question. Are you in a relationship, or are you in recovery from one, while still inside it? Because if you're always the one holding it together, maybe it's not a relationship. Maybe it's just you, trying not to break. If that question made your chest tighten, it's probably because you already know the answer. You've just been trying to make it sound prettier than it is. And the truth is, not all relationships are meant to be repaired. Some are meant to be released, not because the other person is evil, but because the dynamic is unlivable. The Stoics didn't preach detachment because they didn't feel. They practiced it because they refused to be enslaved by what hurt them. Seneca said, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. But a toxic relationship makes your imagination the enemy. It convinces you that leaving means failure, that peace means selfishness, that suffering is the price of love. But here's the shift. When you choose peace over chaos, you're not quitting. You're remembering your worth. You're saying, I won't keep teaching someone how to unlove me. You're drawing a line, not out of anger, but out of clarity. Because self-respect isn't built when they change. It's built when you do. You don't need drama to know a relationship is toxic. Sometimes the damage is quiet. It hides in subtle disrespect, in emotional imbalance, in the slow erosion of your voice, your needs, your peace. But here's what the Stoics taught us. Anything that costs you your clarity, your character, or your calm is too expensive to keep. It's not selfish to walk away. It's self-respect. And the moment you stop begging for bare minimums, for honesty, for presence, for basic emotional safety, is the moment you start rebuilding yourself. So if you saw yourself in any of these signs, don't just nod. Act. Have the hard conversation. Set the boundary. Choose peace over patterns. And if needed, leave. Not for revenge, not to prove anything, but because your mind, your heart, and your future are not disposable. Let go of what drains you. Return to what builds you. Because you were never meant to shrink in love. You were meant to expand in it.